Well, I think one other big thing happened in that span of time as well, which was smartphones and streaming apps, and for people like you and me, we would buy CDs, we would buy records, and that's how we listen to music. I think for people 15, 20 years younger than us, the first thing they'll do if they hear about a band is go to YouTube, go to Spotify.
Yeah. I mean, you can click play. You don't need to read a review when you can click play and assess for yourself if you like it. If you've got ears, you don't need eyes. You're listening to music. So,
For as much as vinyl was kind of a nerdy collector thing, even when I was buying music, now, when I get press releases from labels, sometimes it's like 10, 15 variations of a record. You know what I mean?
oh, yeah, it's nuts. And I'm guilty of it myself. Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. One thing that's really different about all the many variants is like in the early 2000s, it would be like first press all on black, like second press on red, third press on blue. Like it would usually be like a lot of records had to like get repressed to get on color. Or if there was color, it would be like 100 on red, 900 on black or whatever. And a lot of the like as we got into like internet commerce and stuff and a lot of the early days of eBay was all about records that would sell out and be worth so much more just the very next day. I think from where I'm at, we're past that. Like, and that's the thing. Like, if I do 7 vinyl variants, if one sells out, everyone just moves on to the next one. And I don't see the one that's sold out like double in value on Discogs or eBay the next day. Everyone just keeps moving along. And there's much less interest in the pressing numbers. It used to be very much like, oh, I want the most limited one. And now I find a lot of times people just want the one that they think looks the coolest, which is fine by me. So when I'm doing multi-variants, my head is not at like, ooh, this one can be super limited. We'll sell it out the first day. It'll create hype. It'll double in value in the resale market or whatever. I'm really just thinking like, oh, what will look really cool and really complement this package. So the people that do spend their money on my records will just be really stoked every time they pull it out and open it up because we made that little extra step to put a little bit more value into the package.
So, in this current era where, people can, or, let's take it from two sides. An artist can record his music on his laptop, upload it immediately to Bandcamp and, presumably Spotify and YouTube Music or whatever. And on the other side, you have a consumer who can, go directly to a streaming app and, not have to go through a record store, not have to go through a mail order, not have to read a review in a zine. Maybe they'll read about it on Reddit or something like that. But, the artist and the consumer can now interact with each other directly. What is the role of the record company?
There's three main things that I think a record label does right now. A is a record label can give you money. A record label, whether that's money to record, and money for mastering, money to help with the art, but most importantly, money to press vinyl is really what a band wants out of a record label. That's an expense that's usually a bit too far for a band, right? So there's money. Then there's distribution. As much as people have access to music, bands want their records in stores. It's very important. And when a band goes on tour, they usually stop at record stores. That's usually something to do to waste some time in the afternoon before the show or before load in or after sound check or whatever. Bands get fucking bummed when they're out there working and they don't see their records anywhere. That's hard for a band, especially when you're just like getting by on tour. And it can just feel like, oh man, does anyone even care or whatever. So being in stores is still really important to bands. I mean, it's important to me, but as a band, they want their records in stores, and that's getting distribution a good distribution that actually pays, that was one of the biggest challenges that I ever had. And I got burned a bunch before I was in a comfortable spot. So we have the record label has money. The record label has distribution. And then the third thing that the record label has, both as a tastemaker and as someone who's been in the industry, is influence. And I don't mean that in a dirty way, but they know people at the magazines. They are friends with other labels. They know a lot of other bands. They know show promoters. And they, you know, if they're doing their job, they've got a nice social media following. They have fans that have already trusted the record label with other music. So when the record label says, here's the next band I'm going to work with, there's already ears ready to listen. So I think money, distribution, and influence amongst fans and the behind the scenes, the industry part of this, if you're trying to grow your band and, you know, especially if you want to make it your career.
I mean, when I was a kid, you know, when I say kid, I mean, you know, in high school.
Yeah.
If it had that earache logo on it, I had to get it. You know what I mean? Like, I had to own it.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. And there's still, you know, it's really important to me to be like, I actually learned this quote from Ice-T, who's one of my favorites. He said, I never wanted to be the greatest. I just wanted to be in the conversation when people were talking about the greats, you know? So that's kind of how I look at the label. I don't want to be the number one label in the world, but I want to work hard enough that I'm always in the conversation with the other greats and really have that, again, dirty words, brand recognition for, I always apologize when I say industry terms because I come from the DIY basement. That recognition just to build a following, you know. I'd like to hope that Tankcrimes gives value to the bands that I work with as much as their art and music gives value back to the label.
Yeah. I mean, I spoke with Tom Hazelmeyer from Amphetamine Reptile, and, you know, we're good, you know, whatever it is, 30 years or more from the days when.
Yeah, what a cool label. But when it was like the AmRep sound was a popular hot thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, Today's the Day, Helmet, Unsane, like ridiculous, the bands that he uncovered and brought to the world. And I think AmRep is always going to have this cool factor where if a band like Mr. Flies comes out, maybe you'll be interested in a new noise rock band, maybe you won't. But if you find out they're on AmRep, it's like, oh, well, now I have to listen to it, right?
Yeah, and like some things, once you make that mark, you can't even destroy it. You know, you brought up Earache, and now Earache is like a dad rock label. And so, I mean, they just straight up are. I mean, I think Digby would agree. He's a dad rock label, you know, and they invest a lot of energy into that scene, you know. So, but that doesn't take away the feeling that you or I get about the early catalog, you know, like if you make a big enough mark, you can't even destroy it. You know, they're just basically doing something else now. They're just doing something completely different. And it seems like they're even making their mark with that scene. I just have no interest in it, but I still, but that didn't change the importance of not just the sound that they were documenting, but just the importance of that brand.
I mean, to a certain extent, labels like Tankcrimes and Transylvanian Recordings or, you know, Everlasting Spew, these small independent labels are doing the work that the zines used to do in terms of finding the next, you know, I don't want to say the next big thing, but finding like the cool stuff that like people like me would get excited about. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you know, they're on Tankcrimes. Yeah,
well, there's a lot of curation involved in what I do, and I do that with the records that aren't on Tankcrimes that I sell in my store too. You know, I like to think that I'm like, if you trust Tankcrimes, what I've released, you could blindly pick something out of my distro and trust it. You know, like I think I could have like a 9 out of 10 match with somebody who already likes the records that I put out if they would started buying stuff out of the distributed titles that I carry.
And so you said that even in the early days, it wasn't just the records that that selling the records that you needed to break even. It was all the other stuff that you're doing in relation to the label. In this age where people are desensitized from actually paying for music, is that more true than ever?
I don't entirely see it that way, but that's just out of my experience. And I know it's other people's experience. We still do, we still, on a good month, we sell way more physical product than our income from streaming, especially if there's new releases. On a bad month, for like sales, we're at about even, about 50-50 streaming revenue versus physical. But most of the time, we're doing much better with physical. And I just feel like I'm really tapped into real music collectors that really want it. And I've seen, the scene was really aging. And one thing that the pandemic did that was positive in my world is that a bunch of teenagers got into punk and metal again. And I felt like the scene was really aging. I really remember being on tour in like 2018 and 2019 and just being like, man, I'm 40 and I'm like not just the medium age, but like there's not a lot of people younger than me, especially in Europe. And it just really felt like like the scene was aging and there was no new blood. And I didn't, and all these people were predicting like, oh, Trump's going to come back and punk's going to get huge again or whatever. And that just didn't, that kind of happened with George W. Bush, like the Iraq war, and George Bush really kind of fueled punk for a few years there. But after we were in the full on phone age, there wasn't that much, but what happened was, the pandemic put everyone on their phones for a full year sitting on their couch, and people were really ready to come out and do stuff once it ended. And like shows are bigger, but most importantly to me is that I have teenage fans again. And I'm talking to teenagers on social media and they're asking me about records and stuff like that. And I'm talking to kids who are like starting their vinyl collection with like a couple records from Tankcrimes and stuff like that. And so that's really cool because what I see from my end is that physical is not going to go away at all. I know people talk about the vinyl boom that's been happening or whatever, and Taylor Swift can move 1,000,012 inches, but it's always going to kind of wax and wane, and it depends on which bands are popular and which labels are popular and how they really push what they're doing. But I think that I'm tapped into Tankcrimes isn't something you find out about on your first day of being interested in extreme music. It's kind of, you got to dig a little bit before you get to me, right? So I feel like those people are the kind of people that do want to own something. And I feel like a lot of my fans actually do buy the record and listen to it at home, but also subscribe to a streaming service and listen to the records that they own physically. They also listen to them not via a download card, but just via a streaming app in their car and on their headphones.